Hello and welcome to Moonstar's one-year special. Today on Moonstar's Sailor Moon podcast, Chris and I will be covering how the 90s Sailor Moon anime was produced and some history about Sailor Moon in general. We also just wanted to thank you at the top of the show for coming along on this ride with us this far and say that we cannot wait to see what year 2 of Moonstar will bring. Let's just start the show. See you at the end. Bye! We know that it started as a manga and an anime. Take us through once the deals have been made, right? We're not really focusing on money here. We're focusing more on the tactile version of it. What's the first thing that happens?
I think probably like it is with any anime, even nowadays, the creator gets together with the team that works at the animation studio that is assigned to produce the anime adaptation. Or I'm guessing maybe the creator probably has a say or a choice of who they want to work with, I would think. I know there's been some, not with Sailor Moon, but there's been some like controversy later on with like picking studios and whatever. But anyway, yeah, I think the first step would obviously just be for the creator to meet with the whole production team that works at, in this case, Toei, and decide on how things are going to go.
And then once they've sort of set, okay, this is the direction we're going, this is our creative thought here, who is first in line in the physical production, as far as your best guess, I guess?
In most cases, I think, outside of the creator, it's going to be the director of the anime, and then whoever the lead overall character designer is.
And they would put together, like, the storyboards before any actual animation is done, I assume?
Yeah.
And then once they have everything storyboarded and the plot is, discussed for that week's episode or whatever and finalized, I guess the scripting would come before all of that, right?
Like the scripting of, you mean like how the season would go? Like how the story would go?
No, just for, like, per episode.
Oh.
Like, so, let's say we're producing episode 1.
Yeah.
They would write the script before the storyboard, or would they storyboard before script?
No, in Japan, the way that anime is made, it's not like American cartoons where it's animated to people's performances. In Japan, it's always been, it's created first, and then the story stuff comes after that.
Really?
Yeah.
I find that so... I wonder why. Do you think it's because they're focusing more on the art of it?
Yeah, I guess that's probably the only reason.
So they do that, they do the storyboard, and then where do sketch sets come into play?
That would be like the stuff that I have, and sketch sets and cells are pretty much the same thing. So all that would be configured once everything is good to go and is like approved overall, and then that stuff happens, and then obviously it's fully animated, and then the voice actors get to record, and then they're to match the lip movements, what's happening on screen.
And when they're at the end of this production line, like recording everything that's on screen in front of them, in Japan, do you know if they use, what method they use for that?
I think from what I've seen, I don't know if they use a beep system. I think, at least back then, I think from what I've seen, that they just, like, the director would just rewind the scene however many times it would take if they needed to do something over,
like to do retakes or whatever.
Yeah.
I want to go back to the cells a little bit too and discuss, like, what is that? Because I know we've talked about it before, but I want this to be a good reference episode. Tell everybody what a cell is.
Yeah, so prior to the early 2000s, anything animated, not just in Japan, but anything animated had to be traditionally created and hand drawn and hand painted frame by frame, and then animated in like a flipbook style way. So everything that you were watching before the 2000s, you know, it was a whole team of people that were manually doing everything, and the cells are on plastic. It's short for celluloid, and anything, not just with like producing a TV show or movie. It's like back then for anime, anything like a magazine, like art for a magazine cover, art for a CD cover, art for a videotape cover, like random merchandise, all of that had to be done by sketch work and cell work first. So it was way more involved back then.
And the cell itself, once they've created what you were describing, the foreground,
yeah,
and that's done with like ink and special types of paint, I believe, right?
You mean like background and foregrounds?
Well, yeah, like because they have the transparency on the celluloid.
Yeah.
And I think both of them are on the same material, right? The background and the foreground, but they layer them when they're putting together a scene, and that's so they can reuse different backgrounds and stuff, right? And just it's kind of like for people who know Photoshop, think about like the foreground image would be the character if you cut them out, like using if you their magic wand tool or whatever, and just completely got rid of the background. And then you can, like, the layer underneath that in Photoshop is literally the next page of celluloid, which is the background. It's like physical Photoshop, basically. Taking stuff like that is probably why certain editing programs are the way they are, because they probably based it from that procedure or a similar one. How long would you estimate it would take to produce a full episode of Sailor Moon?
You can probably find that information. I don't know. I know there's a YouTube video from, I think, like season 1 or 2 that shows people working to make something and like how they animated something. Probably maybe a week. I don't know. Depends on how fast they're working.
Well, I would say they probably have a pretty specific schedule for stuff like that. And it sounds like they were doing it quickly. So I would guess a week, maybe 2 at the most, depending also on how far along the manga was. Because sometimes it would lag behind because of that.
Yeah.
What else could we add about the actual production of the show?
One kind of sad part about it, I guess. We've talked about it on the episodes before, but a lot of the people that are many would deem most iconic to work on the original series left after Super S. They left before Stars because of a lot of internal conflict between them and Toei. Like Ikuko Ito left, and obviously, and Kunihiko Ikuhara left, who he was he directed a bunch of episodes starting in season 1, and then he got more esteem as a director. Like he directed the finale episodes of S and Super S, and I don't know however many other people. There were a lot of people that left after Super S just because of mistreatment from Toei and disagreement of creative freedom.
It is sort of a sad mark on the show's history, but I think it also probably speaks to that time period in general for the creation of a lot of things that were done by hand like this.
Yeah.
Because unfortunately, when you're a creative person working in a world that sees success measured by $1 or whatever currency you use, that starts to take over eventually in almost every circumstance. You know what I mean? And you can see it in almost any creative project that is on that level, where like there's all kinds of merchandising that goes into it, and all that stuff is great and everything, but like the scheduling and all of that, it's pure. I have to imagine that is purely a money thing. Like if they were given the freedom to do this in as much time as they needed, the quality would be incredible. But then it would be like, well, we're paying you hourly, right?
I think so.
I don't know. So like it seems like one of those things where they did the best with their situation, and that's probably why we got such a quality product to begin with.
Yeah.
But they burnt out because of that too, and they left over it, which is sad.
Mm-hmm.
Do you think this type of thing happened a lot in other anime situations?
Oh yeah, yeah. Especially back then. I'm sure it still happens today. But with how involved it was to traditionally create anime back then, you could probably find. I'm sure, like if you look on different Japanese Wikipedia pages for certain series and certain studios, I'm sure you can find all kinds of stories.
Oh yeah, I might dig around and see if there's anything worth including. Let's do a little bit about the history
Okay.
of the show in general. So, the show was initially planned both as an anime and a manga, but it was only supposed to be one season. Because of its popularity, they asked her to continue drawing the manga, which initially she struggled with, and that's why we ended up, like I said, with the Hell Tree or the Doom Tree arc. That's where the first delay came from. And Sailor Moon itself is adapted from 52 chapters of the manga, which was published in the Nakayoshi magazine from 1991 to 1997. Have you ever seen any of the Nakayoshi magazine, any original scans or pictures of them or anything?
No, I don't think I've ever looked it up. I mean, I've probably seen it just without even realizing it.
It's kind of like the way, it's all very similar to her art style. I don't think she was the only artist they published, but I think it was that kind of thing. It's something that I think if I was a Japanese kid at that time, I absolutely would have been getting that magazine.
Yeah.
And I don't think we really had anything equivalent to that over here in the United States, because all of the magazine subscriptions I can think of were geared towards adults.
Yeah.
Except maybe Zoo Books. And that's not a real magazine. That's just you know what I mean. Although there was Teen Beat and Tiger Beat or whatever the heck, but that's nothing like this. That was kind of a comic release taken seriously, So I think it's cool that they actually have stuff like that. Yeah, what is TV Asahi? Do you know?
That's a channel.
Is it probably their predominant animation channel?
I think one of them. Yeah, I think Japan had a bunch of TV stations that showed anime back then, new anime.
Probably. So it says it premiered on TV Asahi on March 7th, 1992, which the show it was taking over from was called Goldfish Warning. I've never heard of that, but it sounds adorable. Have you ever heard of it?
Yeah, I vaguely know what it is.
Tell me about it.
I think it's a children's show too. I think it is even more very apparent that it's geared towards children than Sailor Moon is. Yeah, that's I know very little about it offhand.
I'm gonna look it up and we'll talk about it later for fun. But so Sailor Moon, once it had that time slot, it appears it ran for the full 200 episodes at that time slot until it concludes on February 8th, 5 years later, which I think it's impressive that it held the same time slot the entire time.
Yeah.
Because stuff gets shuffled a lot, at least here, based on how it's performing and stuff.
Yeah.
So, because they were doing the anime at the same time as the manga, sometimes it would lag by a month or two. And that's one of the reasons why this anime in particular does not follow the manga exactly. How do you feel about that in general?
In terms of the original Sailor Moon series, I'm not really all that bothered by it. Because a lot of the filler episodes, especially in the later seasons, are great, and you don't even really know that they're filler. So,
yeah, I agree. They feel more like character development than anything. There's a handful that I really would classify as filler, but even those are fun. And something that I think works to its advantage, it almost spoiled me because this was my first anime, and I loved that I could read the manga and have a completely different experience with the same characters, and then watch the anime and it was something else, but it's still similar enough that you know what I mean? And then I would see other stuff like Inuyasha, I think is a good example, where it's exactly the manga.
Yeah.
almost verbatim. And it's kind of like, well, why, if you're going to read one, why watch it? Or if you're going to watch it, why read it? You know what I mean? Like, with not having much differences, I would just get, having seen the whole anime. So to me, I actually think that is an advantage that happened accidentally, because it gives the anime a place to stand on its own, separate from the manga.
Yeah.
Oh, this I thought was interesting though. Naoko has said that because the anime was created by predominantly a male staff, she feels like it has a slight male perspective. What do you think she's referring to?
Probably, I would think that just the way that characters would handle things in the show would be the way that a guy would, at least over in Japan, culturally at that time. I don't really agree with that, but I think it's probably a cultural thing over there.
I think that could be part of it. I did notice when I was watching the Pluto channel that has like the Japanese on it.
Yeah.
There are some, they're not panty shots. I hate that word, because they're in their sailor outfits. It's like a unitard. But what would you call it? Like, you see under their skirts sometimes. And I think little moments like that, when she draws in the manga anything that has any kind of nudity or whatever, it's done in a very soft way. It's done in a very non-sexual way, in my opinion. And I think little moments like that, it's not like they were over-sexualized, but I don't think she would have included that.
Yeah.
And I think she probably would have given certain characters more femininity than is in the anime. Like, I think specifically Makoto's character in the manga comes off both masculine and feminine, but in more extreme ways on the feminine side too. And in the anime, it's kind of like she's very much a tomboy, but then, oh, she bakes. Like, it's not quite as nuanced, I don't think, for some of the characters either. But I also I think when you make something like this that is so much from your heart, it would be really hard not to be very protective over it when it's like put into other formats. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So I could see why she feels that way. After its initial run, it kind of faded away for a while, and then the series got a new resurgence in 2009 in Japan, and it was rebroadcast starting on September 1st. And then also in Italy the next year. And Naoko like greenlit this and was producing new artwork to promote it, which is kind of exciting because it had been dead for a little while by that point. Do you remember, were you part of the fandom at that point? 2009?
I don't, yeah, because I would have been in, I think, 5th grade or 6th grade, so I think by then I wasn't thinking about Sailor Moon quite as much as I was thinking about like Naruto and Bleach and shit like that.
Right.
Yeah, I didn't really start embracing it way more. Well, I guess no, because like a year later was when I got my first cells, and they were both of Haruka, so I guess.
Yeah, but a year feels like a long time at that age.
Yeah, I guess.
Yeah. So you were probably like just leaning in a little at this point. I was in this time a couple years into college, my first roll through at it. And I kind of remember when this started to happen because it bubbled up in Japan, and then it came over here a few years later when we started getting new merch and stuff. I remember the wall scrolls and things like that, and Hot Topic, I want to say, started putting out, random things with Sailor Moon stuff on it. It was one of those times where like I used to come in and out of the fandom, in phases.
Yeah.
And that was one of the moments that really brought me back in. And then Crystal dropped, and I hated the first season of it, and I left again. And by left, I mean, like, I was just doing other things. But it was so disappointing because I don't know if you remember, but the build-up to Crystal was huge.
Yeah, I can remember
and
that.
Then it dropped, and we got what season 1 was, and I was like, what the F? It was a great example of, like, don't oversell it.
Yeah.
But yeah, so that was when Sailor Moon got its first resurgence. And then we kind of had another one recently, which is not referenced here, but it's when all of the movies and stuff started coming out.
Yeah, a little bit.
Yeah, when did that begin?
I think it was during COVID, like when the first Eternal stuff started dropping press wise.
I think you're right. So like 2021 probably.
Yeah.
Maybe 2022. So that's kind of the general history of the original production as far as the Japanese series goes for Sailor Moon. The English dub, so this is the 90s English one that we talk about a lot. This one came about in 1995, and there was a bidding war between Toon Makers and Renaissance Atlantic Entertainment, and they wanted to produce an American live-action animated hybrid adaptation.
Yeah.
It's a mouthful. That's known as, it was called Saban Moon for a long time. Have you seen this?
Yeah. Yeah, like
Did you... Go ahead.
even before the footage got found, like within the last year, you would see cells of the American Sailor Moon on eBay. It seems like it was, I don't know if it was the same person just relisting them, but yeah, they would come up and like in search results all the time.
That's so funny. My first exposure to it was back in the day. There were allegedly ways to obtain things on the internet through citrus wire and or other, you know what I mean. But like for some reason, somehow, when you would search Sailor Moon, there was like, it was this. Have you seen the video? And it's not the full pilot, but it's like the one that came out before that, where it's like the recording in the room. Do you know what I'm talking about?
Yeah, yeah.
And it was like, it looked to me like, I imagine this was a room of people from the bidding war, and this was the little video package that they had put together to be like, this is our idea of what we're gonna do. We all saw that back in like, 2001 or whatever.
Yeah.
And it was one of those things that in the fandom, everyone was like, we know that they messed it up a lot in a certain way, but aren't we glad that didn't happen though? Like it kind of, even back then, to me, it always sort of helped me be like, well, I'm aware of the changes, but like, at least it wasn't that.
Yeah.
Because if it, well, I would have still watched it, as insane as it is. I don't know that a lot of other people would have.
Yeah.
We're going to do a whole special on that one someday, too. So anyway, we all know Deke Productions LP.
Deke.
Which, by the way, now is called Wild Brain. Ended up getting the license for the first 2 seasons for the English language release in North America. I can't remember, but were you around to watch it when it was airing in 1995?
No, I wasn't born yet.
Right. So this is something that they actually brought up. I think it was Susan Roman, but put it in like the most ridiculous time slot. At like, in some places it was on at 5 a.m. For me it was like 6:30 or 7 in the morning, and it would be on like weekdays, not on Saturday morning cartoons really.
Mm-hmm.
Or it was on Toonami at like 3 in the morning or whatever.
Yeah.
So they really kind of set it up to fail when they initially released it. And I don't know if you know this, but they completely stopped producing the dub in November of 1995 after the first 2 seasons, minus 17 episodes. They didn't even finish the second season.
Mm-hmm.
And they were just like, we're done. Did you know that?
No, I don't think so.
Yeah, and so this brings me back to something we've discussed before, but they reference it here without actually naming the project for what it was. It was SOS, Save Our Sailors, that helped create a fan petition that garnered over 12,500 signatures, and that got the attention of General Mills, like we discussed with the whole Pop-Tart thing.
Yeah.
And they agreed to sponsor and syndicate the rest of the Sailor Moon dub through something called the Program Exchange. This is actually considered also an early example of successful fan activism in general, which I think is pretty interesting that Sailor Moon gets to claim something like that.
Yeah.
This is something that I think is very unique to being part of a fandom of a show or a franchise when it's brand new. So you're like experiencing it as it's rolling out, right? Going through the roller coaster of all of that is something that people who kind of discover it later don't get to participate in. But that's why I want to do the show, because I like want to give them the best lens of like what that might have been like, you know, in case they're curious. Like, what do you think? What would your reaction been if you're like, okay, I've seen bits of this show, season 1, season 2, and now it's just gone? What would you have felt like in that climate?
I mean, I definitely would have been, especially by the time that season 4 ended and people would be wondering about stars. If you had the means to look it up, like if you were old enough to look up that there was a final season, I would definitely, feel that way.
Well, let me give you a better reference, though. This is 1995, so you don't have internet like you do today. You have dial-up if you're lucky. Also, there was no Wikipedia. Google, I believe in 1995, did not exist yet. I'll have to fact-check that. If it did, it was pretty new. So finding information was not like it is today either. And the only way you would really be able to tell that they stopped production on it is that the episodes just stopped happening.
Yeah.
You fall in love with this show. They put out all of this merchandise, which, by the way, another thing. I have a lunchbox, like a tin lunchbox from the 90s, and it features Moon, Mercury, Jupiter, and Mars. But there's no one else on it. And I was thinking about it, and I was like, oh, this was produced before Venus joined the cast, because it took like a full, like, think about that. We haven't even met Venus yet, and we're recording our 1-year special right now.
I know.
Does that make sense? So like there was a whole year of merchandise where most of the characters are just not included because they weren't released yet, which I find so fascinating.
Yeah.
But anyway, so we know that, going back to the Deke whole thing, Deke ended up getting it, and they had to make mandated cuts to content and length, which reduced the first 89 episodes by 7. So they cut 7 full episodes out. And it was originally meant to like bounce off of the success of the Mighty Morphin Power Rangers too. Doesn't that comparison or that parallel come up a lot?
The Sailor Moon and Power Rangers? I don't hear it that much personally.
Really? I've seen it, and maybe it's just because I'm reading these things, but I swear it's been mentioned a few times. The series, the English version, first premiered in Canada on August 28th, 1995 on something called YTV. Have you ever heard of YTV?
I think that might have been like what Cartoon Network is down here, because I know that even going into the 2000s, they were one of the channels that played anime in Canada.
Yeah, and they had this little live segment between the shows, because they played Digimon and stuff on there too. And for a while, it was Sugar.
Yeah.
The voice of Minnie Moon. And I watched some of the clips of her on there, and I just have to say, what a charismatic, hilarious, fun individual.
How you doing, Sugar?
I'm very happy to see you here today.
How tall are you, 4'2", or what?
Yeah, my dream is to do like a gangster role, you know, where I like run the mob. So would you ever do something like that? No. A lot of stuff is going to happen for you. I can feel it in my bones. Thank you. I'm good at predicting this stuff. Trust me, I know.
You're not just being nice.
This is to see who's the real Zorro here. 1, 2, 3, 4. Thumbers.
You're done, baby.
I wasn't expecting
Now you
that.
can go back to Canada.
You feel a little bit disconnected and don't know how you can help. Do you think that, everybody of all ages can help something like this?
Absolutely.
Do you think it's important to grow and change as a person as you get older? Absolutely. The hip-hop Hebrew, it touched me.
I just did like a Rabatan, Nivare, Yehi, Shemado, 9, man.
Why is it fun to throw up sometimes?
Because to get rid of all that nasty shit you ate the night before.
You swore.
Oh, sorry.
How come there's something called puberty, and what is it?
It's something between an adult and child.
What?
It's between an adult and a child.
Isn't that illegal?
I think puberty is around age 12.
Oh. Okay, what does God look like, though?
I don't believe in God.
Do you believe in Santa? Okay, bye! I've seen you in my dream. If you have any kind of message for Jay Leno, now is the time to tell him.
He's kind of Bakersfield.
Yeah?
Yes.
You know him?
Yeah, well, yeah.
Yeah, Bakersfield. Hey, you want a Zerbert?
A Zerbert? What's a Zerbert?
You don't know what a Zerbert is?
No.
Are you sure?
Do you know?
Go like this. Ready? Zerbert. Ready? Mistake! Mistake! Ice cream! Ice cream!
So after Sailor Moon R is wrapped up, in 1999, Cloverway gets involved. What are some of the major changes that happened when it went over to Cloverway?
The voice actresses for Venus and Mercury change, and Pluto.
And Sailor Moon. We get Linda Valentine here.
Yeah.
And also, I don't know, it doesn't exactly say why. It could have been due to changes in the laws or whatever, but they were able to fully dub Sailor Moon S and Sailor Moon Super S. They just were not able to air the uncut episodes, but they were able to release them on VHS and DVD.
Yeah.
And even though it says it's uncut, they still have certain changes in it, like making Uranus and Neptune cousins and things like, and then the fisheye change and everything. But they at least like don't have scenes missing or whatever.
Yeah.
So that was for seasons 3 and 4. And then Pioneer Entertainment was the one who handled all the VHS and DVD release. And it was first aired on YTV on September 13th in 2002. The original airing, that would wrap up all of that, because I'm assuming from there they showed seasons 3 and 4.
Mm-hmm.
Just to get through watching the first dub back then, like, are you starting to see how much effort someone would have to put in just to do that? Having to scour through a physical newspaper, looking at the TV listings, like, okay, where is this show? It's constantly moving. It's constantly on different channels. Sometimes it was on network, sometimes it was on cable, which are two different things. The home video and stuff did come out, but it would be kind of like, well, Suncoast has these random volumes, and then Target has volume 7. You know what I mean? Like, even that, there was no Amazon to order from. So it was like a labor of love to be a fan for the series. And that's why I think it has such long-term dedicated fans in general. There's just a little thing here that I highlighted too. We know what a lot of the changes were, right? They edited out some of the bathing scenes that had some nudity in it, or they would like edit it to cover the nudity if they wanted to still include the scene. Sailor Moon's, what does this say? Some of the dialogue was changed, and then they had to change some of the characters like Zoisite, Fishite, Kunzite, Sailor Uranus, and Sailor Neptune. This was a very interesting point that I thought the wiki brought up. Changing evil characters' genders to female also had the side effect of creating more diverse female characterizations, as the evil female characters did not have the same body type.
Mm-hmm.
So they inadvertently were giving us non-binary representation completely by accident.
That was I think that was mainly just with Fisheye.
More so with Fisheye, but if you want to think about it with Zoisite's character, it's like, think about the way the world is now, if you really want to look at it that way. Zoisite very easily could have been a non-binary or a trans character who is like, well, I'm female presenting, this is the current state of my situation. I don't know, I think that it kind of like, as it's also up to you how you want to look at it.
Mm-hmm.
I think some people are too bothered and can't handle it, and that's their right. They don't have to. I think other people understand why that was done and understand the climate of the time, and they just get it, and they're also fine with it. And then there's other people who want to say, yeah, but look at the accidental positivity here.
Yeah.
You know, what camp do you fall in?
I guess that's a good point, yeah. I mean, I do think that, especially for, well, I guess, yeah, for Zoicide and Fisheye too, Deborah Drakeford and, I'm blanking on,
I want to say Katie Bell for some reason, but I don't think that's
no,
right.
No, not for Zoicides.
Kristen Bishop.
They both did well. I mean, you can appreciate their characterization of playing them as female characters.
Mm-hmm. I agree. But yeah, I don't know. Why do you think people feel so strongly about it?
I mean, I can see, you know, obviously in certain scenes of the original dub, it's like it's not very good acting, but I'm on the same page as you from the sense that, you know, there's definitely positive, like really good moments too, and those don't overshadow. I don't think the negative like overshadows the positive. Especially if you grew up with it, depending on how old you are.
Yeah. Also, this is just general, like, reception, but Sailor Moon has been said that it features one of the best known Yuri or lesbian relationships in history between Sailor Uranus and Sailor Neptune. And that, I think, has been we've talked about it before, but I think that representation was key for a lot of people.
Yeah.
Then they also reference the Sailor Moon villains and something, because sometimes critics will say like, oh, formulaic monster of the day. But they were also saying how Sailor Moon has two kinds of villains. They have the monster of the day and then the thinking, feeling humans.
Yeah.
And they said that's sort of common for anime and manga, but it's almost unheard of over in like the Western animation world, or almost unheard of in the West. Isn't the West Japan?
No, the West is the U.S.
Oh, you're right. I'm not good at geography. Listen, Linda. Anyway, so yeah, like that makes more sense. I was like, wait, what? So yeah, but they're basically saying like, probably one of the reasons why it did well is that there weren't a lot of things like that over here at the time. And of course, it's been, you know, commended for its portrayal of strong friendships and having a cast of very diverse characters who are all multidimensional and have very unique personalities and storylines and stuff.
Yeah.
Okay, that's South Korea. I think we can skip that. Like, I don't think we need the South Korean drama. Anyway, that's all I have about the Sailor Moon history. Is there anything from your experience that you want to add?
It's not really about back then, but I don't know if I've mentioned it. Well, yeah, I think I have mentioned it in episodes since we've been doing this, but it is really amazing that for the past year now that Mandarake, which is a long-running Japanese company for toys and collectibles and all kinds of stuff. They have like physical stores all around Japan, and they have an online auction once every other month called the Big Web Auction that goes for 2 weeks. For the past year now, I don't know if it's Ito herself, or it's obviously someone who knows her or something if it isn't her, but she's been, I know I've mentioned this before, that she's been stuff that she drew for like magazine covers and Laserdisc covers and DVD covers for Sailor Moon, like the original sketches of those have been on auction on Mandarake regularly for the past year.
Oh my gosh, the Laserdisc covers are some of the best.
Yeah, like in the last one that they did, the two of hers that were up this time, it was the second to last cover for Super S, which is the one where Mamoru or Tuxedo Mask and Sailor Moon are embracing, and then And then it was also the sketch for the cover of the final Japanese S volume, which is
it's all four of them, the outers and Serena, right?
Yeah.
In the center. It's, if you guys want to look up that image, look for the Awakening Sailor Moon S. It's the cover art for the English stuff too.
And the sketches for both of those covers sold for $11,000 when they ended.
Oh my gosh. Worth. I would never be able to spend that much on something like that, but whoever got it, I hope they love it.
Yeah.
And I'm glad that it got something at that level, because it's really high quality.
Yeah.
That's really cool. And I don't think we got that into detail about that.
No.
Thank you for listening to our 1 year special, also known as the Sailor Moon Anime Production and History Special. Those of you that tune in regularly and like the posts and all of that bring Chris and myself as much joy as I hope we're bringing you. So thank you for that. We've gotten a few more reviews, so thank you for doing that for us as well. Definitely appreciate it. And so yeah, I'll see you next week when we start the 7th volume, VHS volume, of Sailor Moon titled Green-Eyed Monsters. Bye. For more of Chris, you can find him at Chris Mayek, ChrisMayek, on the socials and YouTube. For more of me, Alex, you can find me on Instagram at AlexSummersSFE. The easiest way to stay up to date with everything Moonstar is to follow the Facebook page and bookmark moonstarpod.com. If you liked what you heard on today's episode, leave us a 5-star review wherever you get your podcasts. Moonstar, a Sailor Moon podcast, is sponsored in part by sailormoonvideo.com. Looking for authentic Sailor Moon VHS or DVD tapes that contain the 90s English dub of the show? Check out sailormoonvideo.com now. Prices vary based on quality, rarity, and availability. Moonstar, a Sailor Moon podcast, is created for informational, educational, and entertainment purposes only. We claim no ownership over any audio clips or sound effects used during the creation of this show. All audio clips and sound effects used belong expressly to the license and copyright holders.